What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Riverview Wellness Podcast. My name is Sierra Meacham, and I've got Reed Hammond here with me. And today, we're going to be talking about hypertrophy training. What is it? Why is it good for you? Why you should be doing it? You want to kick us off, Reed?
Yeah, why it's the best form of training, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, hypertrophy training really is great.
Well, can you tell the people what it is first? Because not everyone knows what that means.
Yeah. So hypertrophy training is just a style of resistance training, and it prioritizes maximizing muscle growth specifically. When people say hypertrophy training, they're saying, I want to go to the gym, and my end goal with these workouts is to grow my muscles. And that's a kind of an important distinction to make. I was actually just talking about this with someone recently who didn't realize there was so much variety in training styles. The alternative would be something like a sports-specific kind of training.
Well, you've got, power, which is all about force production and speed. That's
Sure.
like heavy,
Like a powerlifting style of
reps.
training.
Yep. And then you've got like strength training, which I would argue powerlifting actually is more strength, and then Olympic lifting is more power. Strength is like
Okay,
your
you're
heavy,
kind of nuancing
slow.
the terms, a little semantic.
Yeah, because strength is not speed versus power is speed and strength.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I've heard that before as well. It just sounds like the kind of distinction an Olympic lifter would make.
And then I guess muscle endurance is another important distinction to make.
Yeah, I mean, with hypertrophy in particular, you're really looking at particular rep ranges that get you out of the ballpark of your power strength training stuff, right? You're not going super low reps, but you're also not going so high that it just becomes cardio, right?
Yeah.
So usually what this looks like, a sweet spot for a lot of people is that 8 to 12 rep range is a good starting point, a good reference point for most of these exercises. But even I would say 8 to 20 is pretty comfortable, pretty normal. And then depending on the exercise, I would even say as high as 30,
Yeah, I wouldn't tell that to the average person, though.
I would just say it's exercise dependent.
Yeah.
So, but the reason we have these rep ranges is because you're looking to get within a certain range of failure to achieve the best results in terms of muscular growth, right? So you're not maximizing necessarily the amount of output your muscles can produce for 1 or 2 reps like you would for a powerlifting thing. But instead what you're trying to do is within, let's say like a 8 to 12 rep range, you're trying to get as close as you can to failure within those 12 reps.
Yeah.
So,
what does research say? You could get within like 2 to 3 reps of failure.
So I think with the cutting edge research that I've been trying to keep up with, we'll say within 5, technically, I think produces roughly the same amount of growth, but it gets optimally marginally better the closer you get to that like 1 to 2 rep range within the range of failure.
Yeah.
So really what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to failure. You're trying to achieve failure. That's kind of the goal. That's going to get you the most bang for your buck in terms of optimization.
And I guess why should the average person have some level of hypertrophy training in their fitness routine? Like some people just want to run all the time.
Sure.
Some people just want to lift really light weights for a ton of reps. And that's why I kind of said earlier, I don't know if I would always advise people like trying to hit that 20 to 30, because some people just are really light weights and you're achieving muscle endurance. You're not going to increase the size of your muscle, at least not typically.
You wouldn't do that.
Increasing the energy output of it. But yeah, like why?
Yeah.
What's so great about it?
It's really interesting because, at least to me, I love it because it's super sustainable, right? It can fit everyone's routine. I mean, obviously on the upper ends, you're looking at the extremes. It's a bodybuilding kind of movement, right? That's where the sports side of things the competitive side of things come into play. But as opposed to something like an Olympic lifting sport, which is great for you, it's still very healthy to be engaged in that kind of activity. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, less sustainable over the long term. Like you're not going to be hitting Olympic lifts in your 60s, 70s.
I mean, you could, but you're at a much higher risk for injury.
Okay. So, as opposed to hypertrophy training, which because so much of the optimization and focus of hypertrophy training is technical application and good range of motion and controlled movements. You're right. There's not a lot of like explosive movements in hypertrophy training for the most part, right? It's a matter of go super slow on the way down, controlling the eccentric portion of the movement, and then controlling even the concentric portion of the movement, but not in a sort of explosive way like you would for a cleaning movement for Olympic lifting.
Well, and I guess I want to be clear. Like, I would never take explosive movement entirely out of somebody's routine just because they've reached a certain age. Because for the average person, it's still important, like, to be able to catch yourself from a fall, or if you want to play tennis until you're 70, 80 years old, like, you still need to have that capability. But where you're coming in is saying, like, the bulk of your training should revolve around hypertrophy. And it's interesting. I mean, most like corrective exercise, or like if you go to physical therapy, if you have some sort of pain, starts with isolating that area with like a hypertrophy training. Because when you build muscle around an area and strengthen the tendons and ligaments and muscle, like, you usually pain decreases, your resilience increases. So like if we do this for our whole body, I think the long-term benefits of that are incredible. I mean, the research supports that.
That's super interesting that you brought up isolation specifically, because I think in addition to being something that is pretty low risk as a form of training, it's also very specific in a way that I don't think a lot of exercises can be, to what the individual needs, right? You can dedicate more time to your weaknesses because you can say isolate an area of your body in a way that a heavy compound movement isn't going to do in some other trainings. Now, hypertrophy training does also include compound movements, or at least it can, depending on your programming.
I guess, and we're saying isolation exercise, compound exercise. Should we define those real quick?
In the context of what we're discussing here, like an isolation movement would be targeting specific muscles or a very small muscle group.
Yeah, it's like a one joint movement when I curl my bicep.
Bicep curl is a great example, right? When you're doing a bicep curl, you're just hitting your bicep. If
your
you're doing
elbow
it right.
is the only thing moving. Yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to like a bench press, which is a great exercise, but you're hitting your triceps, your front delts, your chest. Like, you're hitting a bunch of big muscles. Bending at multiple joints. Exactly.
Which has value.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, and I don't mean to, I don't discourage that. I do compound movements all the time. What I mean more so is that for the 50-year-old guy who's having knee problems and he's not super concerned about building up his upper body with a huge compound movement, he can spend more time focusing on the knee joint and the muscles around the knee with hypertrophy training specifically. And like you brought up, being able to build up the muscle in an area often tends to give you better control and more comfort in that area just across the board. So in addition to being very safe and very low risk and very sustainable over the long term, it also means that you can target your weaknesses and grow where you want to grow. And I would argue usually this means holistically you probably want to grow everywhere, right? But in certain cases where you have injuries or you want to, compensate somewhere, right? You can target those things as you need to.
Yeah, and I guess even looking at the whole aspect of nutritionally, we were talking to someone about this just the other day, that you become more metabolically efficient when you have a lot of muscle mass. And it's interesting. I've kind of dove into the research around it, and it's a lot of people like to say, like, you just burn more calories when you have more muscle, which is true to a small degree, but the reality is you become more sensitive to be able to break down stuff more efficiently. I don't know if that makes sense the way that I'm explaining it. It's not necessarily as simple as like, oh, I just burn more calories because I have muscle. Like, I could eat a pint of ice cream, for example, and the average person with no muscle mass who maybe, let's go the extreme of saying they are pre-diabetic, they're going to have a really hard time breaking down all of that glucose, the insulin, to pull that into the places where it's supposed to go. So they're going to have a flood of glucose sitting in their blood. And that is really bad. Like, there's a ton of research around the problems that creates. Obviously, this person is pre-diabetic, so that is the direction it's pushing them in. When you have a lot of muscle, it more easily can take that glucose that you're maybe eating way too much of in a pint of ice cream and distribute it in places.
There's a place for the stuff to go. You make your body more resilient, and it does the heavy lifting in a lot of different areas, right? Literally, it's moving more weight now that you have more muscle mass, but also there's just you give yourself an outlet that wasn't there before,
Yeah,
right?
you're just more flexible almost all around. You're flexible to
Yeah.
move better. You're
And
flexible
that's
to be more
another-
injury resilient. You're flexible to eat more of what you want.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think is a super big strength of hypertrophy training specifically is when it's done right. Like, and a lot of people get this idea in their head where it's a matter of, oh, I can't get big. If I get too much muscle, my mobility becomes limited. And I will just dissuade the listening audience here. You're not going to get that big. Like, you have to be so
I mean,
significantly
you could,
larger.
but yeah.
The general audience, though, is not even a concern, especially because proper hypertrophy training will say put you in positions where you're going through a full range of motion. That means, like, for example, I do deficit RDLs. And what that means is, and maybe you say, like, okay, I'm not that big yet. But, like, what I'm doing is I'm putting myself in a position where I'm basically stretching. I am literally stretching, actually, while I'm doing my exercises. And a lot of hypertrophy movements actually prioritize this stretch position. So you're forcing your body into a good range of motion, allowing you. I know a lot of guys who do this, and their flexibility actually improves as a result of hypertrophy training because now they're actually doing some stretching, whereas the alternative was nothing before, right?
Yeah. Well, and
So-
if you have a good understanding of where your range of motion is limited, and I say this because I cannot tell you how many people I meet who think that they are not flexible, and we do a movement screen
Sure, yeah.
here at Riverview Wellness, and there's so many people who think I need to keep stretching. I've never lifted weights in my life, but I'm really tight, and we take them through a movement screen, and they are like super flexible. So like
Yeah, you're the
resistance
opposite.
training it'll help tighten up the areas that are supposed to be tight.
Yeah.
Well, also you're training through that full range of motion, so now you're taking better ownership of that range.
You
But
get more control. Yeah, as
Yeah.
a direct result.
and the point that I was going to make there is if you understand where maybe you are limited in range of motion, let's say you have, tight hamstrings. If you strengthen the antagonist muscle, that would be your quads. They're the opposite of what your hamstrings do. That also is a way to help. I wouldn't exactly say get more length in the hamstrings, but you're giving more for them to be able to move better. So I don't know. Just point being, be strategic with your training, using
if
training to your end range, understanding those things.
If you're applying good technique, then you minimize the risk even more, and you just improve the outcome in terms of mobility. I think a lot of people get this in their head and like I even see this kind of like casually thrown around because aesthetic is a very important thing for a lot of people. People are worried that they don't want to look too big. They want to look a certain size. They have a certain like dream physique in mind. There's this idea that I'll go to the gym, I'll start lifting weights, and I'll just immediately overshoot my dream physique. And I think it's the same thing that people are thinking about when they say like, I'll get too big that I won't be able to touch my toes, right? But you have the ability to control these things, and they're not like, I will say, like, the newbie gains thing is real. Like, if you don't have any
Yes.
experience, you will put on a lot of like muscle fast. But this is fast over the course of weeks and weeks. It's not like you're gonna wake up one day.
Yeah, and it's still not nearly as much as people would think. I don't want to say that to like knock down your hope. It takes some hard work.
Yeah,
to
you
put
got to
on.
be consistency is a real big thing. It's not a 1 week thing, right? It's better than people think it is in almost every capacity. I think people with a kind of a passing understanding of it, at least, where it just gives you more agency. You have more agency in terms of how you move. If you can start exercising, you have more agency in how you look, how you feel. Your range of motion becomes better. You have more agency in terms of what you eat. Although I would still encourage you to maintain a healthy diet, obviously.
healthy
You got a little
food
bit more
still.
wiggle room now, Like,
Yeah.
everything just starts to run better, I think, as a result of hypertrophy training. And because it's so safe and just generally good for you, right? It's super applicable over a lifetime.
My final takeaway for everyone is if you are a runner or you're somebody who stretches a lot and does yoga, you need to be lifting weights. Even like people will get to a certain age and think that that's not for me, or even like younger people, like teenagers are fantastic candidates to start lifting weights. I would say as young as
I wish I started way earlier.
Yeah, like 12 and up. I mean, you could do prior to them, but I would focus a lot more on just movement competency with that. But yeah, I would argue that your exercise routine is incomplete if you are not including those things. For the average person who is just looking to be healthy for the rest of their life, I'd say resistance training, a little bit of cardiovascular training. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to be running, but there is research that supports, I think it's 120 minutes a week of just like brisk walking.
Oh yeah, walking we'll do is the trick so good for you. Yeah.
For your heart health.
Just walk. Walk more.
And your heart rate will get up some with the resistance training as well. And then some level of mobility. I would say this is kind of case specific, but those three things make for a very well-rounded routine.
Hypertrophy training is like, it doesn't even have to be your main thing. You kind of mentioned this a little bit. It works so well as a supplemental sort of training style. Like if you are doing something else, a physical activity, for example, and that's your primary thing, your basketball, your soccer, your whatever, you don't have to be like the gym bro, like going every single day. Like hypertrophy training, like tacked onto that,
will make you
just it's so, I mean, it's just so beneficial, and it's not intensive in the way that's going to like detract from your other activities. So I know you just kind of mentioned that briefly, so I just wanted to like double down.
No, that's
and
a
say,
good
like,
side to add on. Like if you're in sports, it's only going to support that.
It does, yeah. And yes, that's really all I have to say without getting too much more into the weeds here. Hypertrophy training is just, it's really good, and I agree. It sounds like you should just always be doing it to some capacity in your life. So that's where I land. Vote in the comments. Hypertrophy training, Olympic lifting. You know where I stand.
Yeah. So. I feel like hypertrophy training might win out. Olympic lifting is a little bit. We
haven't done an episode on Olympic lifting.
Yeah, maybe we'll save that for another day. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to our channel. Go follow us on social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. And if you have stuff that you want us to dive into, feel free to DM us, drop a comment, something. Let us know. Thanks, guys.